Hey, April. Thanks so much for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me. Glad to be
Let's
here.
let's go into a little bit of rapid fire sort of questions.
Okay.
Um, can you tell us why is it important for the youth to be in government relations?
I think just for a fresh perspective, I think we see from our elected officials that they're older, um, especially at the federal level and even at the state level and local level. And I think in order to find new solutions and new ways to tackle the problems that are facing us, you need a fresh, youthful perspective. And so it's nice to see younger people interested in public policy and government relations and politics in general. And I love seeing whether it's young Republicans or young Democrats. I think they even have like teenage groups that are more civically minded. It's just important for them to understand we live in a representative democracy. And, that representation is important. And to truly represent the populace, you need all ages, all ethnicities, to really put forth the best decisions and best ways to solve the problems that face us. And there's a lot of complicated issues that face us in this world we live in today. And I think you need the wisdom of your elders, and you also need the fresh perspective of the youth.
And how would you encourage them to be a part of this process? I mean, is it and why would you say government relations is the path they should choose over any other field?
I think it really comes down to what their individual interests are. And, kids today, young people coming up today, they have access to so much information. Social media can be an amazing tool. It can also be a negative tool for a lot of young people. And I think that, you know, getting them engaged in something that is more than just who the TikTok star of the moment is, um, sparking their interest in government and how laws that are passed, whether it be at the local, the county, the state, the federal level, how they really do impact our daily lives. And if you want to change or have a voice, that you need to know how the process works. And if you really have an interest in making a difference or improving society as a whole, then the path to get there goes through government in a lot of cases. And there's always a right way and a wrong way to tackle a problem. And while I know that government relations and political science and government in general may not be uh, the most appealing career path, we need more young people to be involved and understand and want to work within the framework, and want to have a voice in their local government. I think a lot of times it goes back to student government and um, you know knowing that even though you're young, that you still have a voice and can have opinions, and that there's ways for those to be heard. Um, and I think that sometimes in schools, like for me, this wasn't the career that I set out to do. And looking back, there's part of me that thinks that if I'd have, I'm envious and I admire the young people who at a very young age are like, I want to do this. And I like the idealism, because I think you need a little bit of that. There's a lot of older lobbyists that have been doing this for a long time. There's a lot of older elected officials at all levels of government. And, after a while, you lose a little bit of that idealism. You get, and I don't want to say you get tainted, but in a way, you kind of see how the sausage is made. And sometimes it's beneficial to have, younger people be part of the process, because it can be inspiring for those of us who've been doing this for a while. And it's good, to have, like I said, just fresh ideas, fresh perspective, a new way of looking at things.
So if you had to give an advice to the youth, what would you tell them?
I would tell them to be true to themselves and determine where your passions lie. And, then from there, kind of map out your career path based on what you're passionate about. There's a quote that says, find something you love to do and you'll never work a day in your life. And I think that's very true. It's been true in my case. I've done a lot of different things in my professional career and I've loved all of them. And so while it's work, it's enjoyable and meaningful work and it doesn't feel like work.
Excuse me. What is the hardest part about your job?
I think the hardest part is taking my personal emotion out of the job. I think and being objective and being able to represent my clients in a very objective way in front of the elected officials, in front of the governing bodies, and taking personalities out of it. And because, lobbying and government affairs in general, it's a relationship driven business. Like your relationships with people are everything. They're the key to your success. Relationships can make pathways of legislation easier. They can also make them harder. And the one thing I, always remind myself is it can't become personal. It can't become personal. You have to be objective about your goal. And there's gonna, in any profession you're in, there's gonna be people that you like working with and that you like personally. There's gonna be people that you don't. Government affairs and government relations is no different. And realizing that you don't have to like everybody in order to be able to work productively with them. And the best way to do that is you just have to take your personal feelings out of the equation and just focus on what the objective is that you're doing and trying to achieve for your client.
And is that something which you can learn? Or is that like a skill or is that something,
I
uh,
think for some people it is a skill. For me, um, I had a dad that was very supportive of anything I wanted to do. And just because I was his daughter, I could have done anything. I could have said, "Hey, I want to be the first football player in the NFL," and he would have fully supported it. Um, he also raised me to be thick-skinned and tough, and to not take things personally. And so for me, um, I don't want to say it's not a challenge, but it's something that comes easier to me than other individuals. And I think I think you can learn. And I think it's just one of those things for some of us, it's easier than it is for others. Is trying to, just sort of tamp down your emotional. And it really depends on what you're working on. Like there's a few issues right now that I'm working on behalf of clients that are meaningful to me personally. And so this has probably been the first session where there's been a piece of legislation that, yes, I have a client in that space, but the passage of this bill will also be beneficial and helpful to my family. And so those conversations can sometimes get hard, especially when you're talking to a member who may not be quite on board with the legislation. So I've probably had to work harder at keeping those emotions and personal feelings in check this session than I have in years past. But on the same flip side, it's probably a session where the things I'm working on, I'm excited about. And, because they really, it's good stuff. Like they're good policies that will have far reaching positive impacts. And, as a lobbyist, when you can say that, like when you're working on something that you also have a personal connection to, and you see, you're moving the needle on that legislation, it's a pretty cool place to be. And it makes the job all the more satisfying.
and speaking of satisfaction, what is the best compliment you ever received?
Oh goodness. That I'm honest and direct and you always know where you stand. So I think that whether you like me or you don't, you will always know where I am on an issue, or where my head's at, or how I feel, like it or not, you'll know.
What is the one thing you would like your family to remember about you?
That I love them.
Good answer. What are you thankful for?
My family and my friends. So, and my business partner, who I've got two amazing business partners. I've got Dodie, who you met, and then Neil Orr. We've worked together and collaborated on not government affairs work, but political work. And he's been my partner since 2016, and he's family. So, and he's family. He's my therapist. He keeps me sane. He um he really gives me that sort of. He's great at playing devil's advocate, and he helps me with perspective sometimes when I'm just frustrated or like, oh my gosh, I can't believe ABC happened. He's excellent at, kind of talking me off that ledge and helping me get sort of realigned and refocused. And I think everybody needs a Neil in their life.
And do you feel like role models play an important role as well?
I do. I do. I think I've been fortunate to have several role models throughout my life in different phases and different things that I've done. Um, the first was an English teacher when I was in high school, and who was one of the hardest teachers I'd ever had, even in college. But she, she was just one of those people that I think we all have that one teacher in high school or middle school that had an impact, and she really did. And then I think I had an aunt, or I have an aunt who is a teacher and longtime teacher, and now she actually teaches teachers. And she was just an excellent role model in Grace. My mom, and being able to just overcome adversity and keep going. Uh, my dad has been just the constant role model throughout my life. My partner Neil, Dodie, and kind of the struggles that she's had, and the career that she's had. And even now I have there's I could list off several more role models, but I think they're important. And if someone says that they don't have a role model, then that makes me a little sad.
So with that, let's jump a little bit back into your past. Can you tell us a little bit about your schooling? Where did you grow up? And apart from the role models you've had, what truly inspired you to get into government relations?
So I grew up in Georgia, a little north of Atlanta in Alpharetta, and I went to the University of Georgia, graduated with a degree in economics. Didn't The only thing I knew was that I really enjoyed school until my dad was like, they don't pay you to go to college. Like, you go to college so you get a job that actually pays you. And so sadly, I had to finally graduate. And my first job out of college actually was my first job ever. I worked with the Gap and worked with them through college, worked with them after college, kind of worked through the ranks through management. Was a regional labor manager with them until they were doing some restructuring, and I would have still was going to be a regional labor manager, but instead of just being responsible for the southeastern United States, I had my choice. I could either move to the West Coast and handle the Western United States, or I could move to New York and have the East Coast. And at that time in my life, just neither of those sounded like something that I wanted to do. And so I put in my resignation and called my dad and been like, I quit my job today. He asked what I was going to do. I told him I had really no idea. at that point, he had moved his company, his construction company, to North Carolina. And he's like, well, you can work with me until you find something. So I actually worked with my dad's construction company and did everything from take measurements of concrete walls to do estimates for basements for builders, to learn to read blueprints, learn to walk on the top of concrete walls as you're measuring them, learned just, the importance of PSI in concrete and the additives, and just way more about that than I ever would have thought I would have needed to know. But that was excellent training ground, or excellent preparation to working in government affairs and public policy. Because in construction, you definitely need to have a thick skin, and you can't get offended easily, and you can't take things personally. And it really does kind of toughen you up a little bit, because if you can deal with a general contractor who has been building homes and buildings for 30, 40 years, then you can pretty much deal with anybody in Raleigh.
Wow.
And so that kind of led to, my goodness, the recession hit, and I went back to the Gap for a little bit. And I worked with them on a contract basis for about a year and a half, and then was just not really, kind of realized that, my days in that kind of corporate world were behind me. That I just, while I think, working for a big corporation out of college in the early part of my career was great. Like, it served its purpose. I learned a lot. But kind of going back in my 30s, I realized that I'm not cut out to work for the corporate structure anymore. So from there, I was trying to decide what I wanted to do next. And I had an opportunity to be a fundraising vendor for the House Republican Caucus. And that's how I met Neil, and did political fundraising until 2016. And actually 2015, that's when I signed my first public policy client, which was a pharmaceutical company, a small pharmaceutical company. And it was kind of one of those things. I had some friends in Atlanta that were the founding partners of Connect South. They had a client that was looking for a lobbyist in North Carolina. And so they called me and were like, we have a client looking for a lobbyist in North Carolina. Is this something you'd be interested in? And I was like, sure, why not? I can do that. And so that was in 2015. And so here we are, kind of stuck. And so started out with one client, and now we have 16 clients. And so it's not really something I sought out to do. It's funny, people ask me all the time, like, how did you become a lobbyist? And I hate saying it kind of fell in my lap, but the opportunity did fall into my lap. It was like I was in the right place at the right time, and it was a good fit and something that I'm good at and enjoy doing. And so here we are. And I'm not going to say it's going to be my last career, but it's the one I've got right now.
Okay. That's a very good, interesting story as to how you gradually work your way up. So when you were back in college, you took economics, right?
I did.
So were you like passionately interested in economics? How did you get into that?
Well, so in college, I wanted to take everything, and I majored. I was a journalism major. I was a pre-law major. I was an English major. I was a political science major. I was a management major. I just couldn't decide on what I wanted to do when I grow up. Plus, I'm one of those, I just enjoy the process of learning. And even now, like if there's an online class that I can sign up for, or if there's a certification I can get, like I'm definitely one of those lifelong learners. I just like the process of learning. And so, like I mentioned earlier, my dad was like, you need to graduate because the University of Georgia is not paying you to go to school. And the way I ended up with a degree in economics and a minor in English is I went to my counselor and I was like, I have to graduate. And I haven't even, what degree am I closest to? Like, what degree can I achieve and graduate the soonest. And so she kind of looked at my very long transcript and said, well, she's like, if you take, you know, 3 more econ classes, you can have a bachelor's in economics. And if you take 1 more English class, you'll have a minor in English. And I was like, done. And so that, and I do like economics, and I enjoy kind of tracking the cycles, like the economic cycles. And so, I mean, and I'm a numbers person, always have been. So anything dealing with numbers kind of clicks with me easily. And I had not realized that I'd taken as many economic classes as I had. But so that's what I was closest to. And so, and I know that's not a very exciting story, because it's funny. I have friends who, they were engineer majors from the first day of college, and, have other friends like they were poli-sci majors all the way through. That just wasn't my path. Like I've always been one of those that there's so many things that interest me. It was really hard just to pick one. Um, and it's funny. I had someone ask her like, oh, it took you so long to graduate. Did you struggle with grades? No, that wasn't the problem. Grades were great. Got a B in tennis, and that was the only B I had. So it wasn't a great thing. It was just indecisive. Like I didn't want to put myself into one box.
Yeah.
And there was there was a lot of cool stuff to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's how I ended up with an econ degree.
Yeah, it's okay.
Never wanted to be an economist. None of that. Just that's what I was closest to.
Oh, I see. Okay, cool. And after you graduated, you tried getting into Gap, and did you learn any skills there which are currently helping you out here?
So actually, when I was in college, I actually did the GAP's management trainee program. Like
Yeah.
they had a program. And then so after college, I um, was assigned to store as a general manager, and just anytime there was an opportunity with the Gap, like I would take it. So there were different assignments for labor production or labor productivity studies and efficiency studies, and any opportunity there was to like travel and do something different with the Gap, I would always volunteer and be like, I'll go and do it. Which afforded me a lot of opportunities to travel a lot of different places and do some really cool things. And so I think with the Gap, like the biggest skill they taught was just, how to manage and work with people, and, how to identify, and how to read people and determine, what makes them tick and how to get the most productivity out of a person, by understanding, what drives and motivates them. And that's the biggest takeaway from the Gap. There's a lot of other things like, budgets and scheduling and, all those kind of business things. But in terms of interpersonal, it really was the interpersonal skill and communication development that I benefited from the most at Gap. And they had a high emphasis on that when I was there. And so that's, one of those skills that has carried me all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
And, a lot of those tactics and techniques I still use today.
Nice. And after that, you worked with your dad in the construction company.
Mm-hmm.
I know you told me that you've gained the skill of, having a thick skin with that. What would you suggest? Let's say if someone who's listening to this and they're debating whether to get into government relations or not, what do you think their first ideal step should be?
Make sure that you've got the personality that can handle it. Make sure that you are thick-skinned, that you're not offended easy, that you don't take things personally, that you're able to be objective, and that you're not afraid of people telling you no and closing doors. And, the other thing is you can't be afraid of hard work, and you can't come into this feeling entitled, and be willing to do the work and to earn the respect of your peers and legislators. Because without those things, it can be a very short-lived career.
And what is now that you're working with Connect South and you're working with different clients, what is the most favorite issue you've worked on so far?
So there's I mean, there's many. Favorite is probably this session. One of our clients, they provide services for adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And so working with members of their appropriations committee, and in particular the one of the senior chairs of appropriations, to get a directed grant for workforce development for this particular client, that they will use those funds to um, provide training and job placement for these incredibly amazing adults that have intellectual and developmental disabilities, but have the ability to be amazing employees and to make exceptional contributions to employers. And this particular organization, they're going to take the funding that we were able to get in the budget and just do amazing things for this, definitely underserved and under recognized population. And I'm sorry for that. I'm actually going to close my door really quick.
That's fine. Go ahead. Keep going.
So, but that's probably been one of the most rewarding, um, just because the organization does amazing work, and the people that they serve, you can't help but just feel good about life when you're around them. So that's been like the most special that I've worked on.
And do
Well,
you And do you like when you pick your clients or policies, now do you make sure that it is in alignment with your personal objectives?
I do. I
Okay.
do. So, um, and that's kind of the benefit. And one of the things I'm very grateful for is, we have an exceptional stable of clients that allow us to work, and me in particular to work on issues that I support, which I think is very important, and that there's some passion about. And um, for me personally, I'm not someone who would ever sign a client just to have a client, or would ever seek to have, a role, stable of like 70 clients that I'm registered for, just so I could say I have 70 clients that I'm registered for. To me, quality will outrank quantity. And I'm proud to say, like, I feel like we have a very um, our clients, we have clients of quality. And the quantity has definitely grown exponentially, and I'm proud of that as well. But I think when you're able to, um, work with clients that you feel good about the work, it's just a win-win.
So over the course of your career, you would have had a lot of wins. Can you tell us a little bit about what were the biggest mistakes or like learnings, I would say? What was something which has stuck with you and which you've grown out of it?
So I had, gosh, that's a very hard question because there's so many. um, I'm definitely one. I was telling someone this the other day, like I have made, some of the best, like some of the most significant growth and learning opportunities, they came out of like just big mistakes that I've made. And I think one is you can't overextend yourself, and it's okay to say no. Um, because I used to be, not so much in recent years, but I would say if somebody asked me to do something, it was impossible for me to say no. Like if someone needed help or assistance, I would bend over backwards, and I would, sacrifice things that I needed to do, that just personal things that I needed to do in order to help somebody else. And when it came to work, like I think all of us, when you're starting out in your career, if you have an opportunity to work more, or to work on a special project, or to, um, handle something that might be outside of your actual scope of work, you don't want to say no. Like you feel like you need to say yes because you want to, um, you want to prove yourself. And it took probably until I was well into my like mid 30s to realize it's okay to say no and not overextend yourself. And I learned that because inevitably when you when you say yes to so much, you end up overextended. And inevitably when you're overextended, you're going to drop the ball on a few things. And I had that happen. And you just kind of have to admit that you messed up and why you messed up, and you learn the lesson, and you realize that you can't say yes to everything. And then you also realize that the things that you do say yes to, in order to do them to the best of your ability, it has to be something that you're invested in and something you believe in and something that you really want to do.
Yeah, well said.
And there's a long list of things I've messed up from, kind of going back to taking things personally. When I was working with my dad, the last thing you want to do when you're on a job site with, 40, a guy that's been building things for 40 years is to, um, you know, get too emotional over something because they definitely will take it as a sign of weakness. Um, and, you learn to be a little more, uh, you know, like you really, that I won't go into all the details, but it takes one situation like that, and you're like, yeah, I really need to kind of get that whole taking things personally, and realizing that 99.9% of the time, it's the way someone communicates or talks to you or around you has nothing to do with you. Or if someone's having a bad day and you get the brunt of that, it's not about you. And that's something I learned in my 30s, but it took like one time just taking things a little too personally to realize like, oh, like that's more him, that's not me. And it was actually that particular individual that taught me that. At the time I was like, I hope I never see you again. But looking back, it was, it sometimes you just need someone with a little more wisdom to teach you those lessons as we get older. And so yeah, and again, I could, like I said, there's many instances where I've made a mistake and messed something up and learned from it. But I don't think we have enough time to go through all of them.
No, I'm pretty sure. I think all those experiences have helped you shape of who you are today. So that's thank you so much for sharing that insight. Finally, I just wanted to ask you, is there anything else which you would like to share with the audience in terms of the do's, don'ts of lobbying, or your wisdom, or what advice would you share in general, or your future? I mean, anything you would like to share as to where do you see yourself down the line? The platform is all yours.
Oh, thanks. um, I think for advice for anyone who's looking to get into government affairs would be um, honesty, like honesty with yourself, honesty with your clients, honesty with the legislators that you interact with, and that there are no shortcuts, that, there's no substitute for being present and showing up and doing the work. Um, and that, if you're going into this business feeling like you're entitled, or like that any member of a governing body owes you anything, regardless of what you think your relationship might be with them outside those walls, that you can't go into this job expecting that they owe you anything. So honesty, uh, don't go into it feeling entitled, and be willing to put in the work because it's work. So
Perfect.
there's very few shortcuts in this business. So,
Perfect. Anything would you like to share about yourself or your organization?
I am pleased. I'm very fortunate and blessed to be a partner in a company like Connect South. I will say from top to bottom, the guys that founded the company, and the folks that I'm able to work with in North Carolina and Georgia and in Tennessee, are just some of the best in the business. And they have a ton of experience on both the political and policy side, and there's just not a better group of people out there to work with, and I'm very blessed. In terms of future, I mean, I tell people every day, like my retirement plan is I'm working my tail off right now, and so that, you know, hopefully 10, 15 years down the line, I can be on a nice little beach somewhere with a store that sells vintage books and wines and wine, and not really care if I sell that many books.
Perfect. That's a very good ending to this amazing conversation, April. I'm pretty sure you've done a lot of proud work for your role models. I think they'll be really happy to see you where you are today. And we really appreciate the work you're doing. Thanks so much for spending this 30 minutes with me again. Thank you again.
Anytime. Thank you for having me.
All right. Bye.